Okay, we are on to our third of three videos on the superpowers of co-creation. In this case, this is the most important one, I got to tell you, using empathy to see multiple truths. And this, this is controversial because some people don't think about multiple truths ever. They only have their own truth. And if you only carry your own truth through the world, you're not going to be a great facilitator of co-creative environments because people bring multiple truths to the table all the time. So for example, again, getting into our primal motivations, we are mostly driven by self-interest. We've evolved over 1,000,000 years to be completely self-interested people that are fixated on our survival and our security, and we will maximize our local environment and our time frame of now to be comfortable, to think short-term, to be materialistic, and seek out extreme comfort. This is natural. I'm not saying it's good, but it is natural, and we have a bias towards this way of thinking. Just keep that in mind. It's, again, that's how we're wired. We also have wiring, though, and this is what we're going to tap into in this class, is empathy. And it turns out we're also hardwired for empathy because this allows us to collaborate. It allows us to work together to survive against the harsh elements. So hunters and gatherers working together. And empathy tends to lead towards long-term thinking. It tends to lead towards altruism. And I know that many of the students today, more so than many previous generations, really want to try to do the right thing. And that's sort of why this studio is being offered as a vehicle for you to exercise some of your desires to get involved in the community and do good in the community, whatever that is. And then overall quality of life. So, and then if you see down here, this is a United Nations symbol. We'll talk a little bit more about sustainability and how that relates to this and how sustainability is trying to unite these two things. And once you unite these things as multiple truths, you'll find yourself to becoming more and more powerful. Now, here are the elephants again, and we talk about fear of the other. So we have one set of elephants here, another set of elephants here, and they're different. They look different. And therefore, we have innate fear and distrust of the other, in quotes. And the fact is, if you're going to be a good co-creative facilitator, you cannot use the other quote. You cannot see other people as other, as the other, as something different or a threat. You've got to dig down deep, and we'll talk about this in a minute. But again, we are hardwired for this kind of biases, right? I see it with architects and interior designers. We don't always like each other. And we tend to make stereotypes about each other that aren't really true. And that's how we reinforce those fears through stereotype, which is very dangerous. So we see each other as threats. And we might not be thinking that consciously, but trust me, even in interdisciplinary work, we see each other as threats to control of the project. So the stakeholders will see the architect or the built environment professional as the other. You may have a clipboard in your hand and a pencil, and maybe, or a pen, and to somebody who's living in a neighborhood, that is a threat. That is the beginning of, say, maybe something that's going to gentrify their neighborhood. So let's just understand that this goes both ways, right? You may be seeing stakeholders as being other. It works the same way. And you as a leader have to break through that and build partnership. And that takes time. So typically you're going to say, we have to protect our own. You see a lot of NIMBYism, NIMBY, which stands for not in my backyard. That's local thinking, that's short-term thinking, and it's also fear-based thinking. So this is the JADE hourglass. I think that in Taya's class, you worked on JADE justice. And so I'm going to take you through how this works out in the co-creative process. And really the most successful co-creative leaders are actually accessing their own bias and privilege. And really understanding how that plays out and then using it to their advantage, meaning using it to others' advantages. If you are unconscious of your bias and you're going to try to lead a co-creative team-based stakeholder engagement, it's going to be very hard. So you've got to start flexing the muscles way down deep in your psyche to come to terms with who you are and what you believe, and be okay with yourself. If you have a bias towards a certain group of people or a gender or something, that's normal. Just acknowledge it and say that you're going to flex new muscles to try to address that. You're never going to eliminate it. And the way we do that is, well, we start with empathy across difference, time, and space. In this case, difference being multiple perspectives. And so empathy is a tool by which we can begin to break down those biases, connect to people that are different from ourselves, and we can get intentional about it, right? The process that you're doing right now in this studio is what I would call an intentional design process, in the sense that it is intentionally delving into your subconscious and your primary motivations. I think all design is intentional, by the way. So this is not a comparative situation, but I like the term intentionality. And it leads ultimately towards, there's sort of a razor's edge here, right? Once you get through this, you can leap up into these in a very authentic way. We see these done very performatively. Everybody has a JADE statement. Everybody is for diversity, but the actions behind that are not always there. And honestly, that is something that we call we-washing. So you'll hear people say, well, we met and we all agreed, but it really wasn't a fully co-creative event. And that's what we're trying to do here. So authentic diversity is really a statement of really digging into finding what is the diaspora of the stakeholders that you want to bring to the table, and how can you really be inclusive, literally include people in the process. And we're going to learn how to do that on April 20th. And we're going to learn how to do this on April 20th. We're going to give a voice. I shouldn't even say give a voice. People have a voice. We're going to make sure that voice is heard and has impact on the design of something, whatever that is. And maybe we can even get into this idea of justice and belonging, where the designs that you create or co-create actually start to restore past injustices. The big problem in America right now is we've never come to terms with slavery. There's been no public statements like other countries have. And therefore, those play out. That sort of tension continues to play out in our country and won't get resolved until the country as a whole comes to a reckoning. So so that's the hourglass. We can't erase our own biases. You can't acknowledge your biases without guilt, and we can build new mental muscles to slowly overcome these biases. Part of that involves seeing the world through multiple lenses simultaneously. What I mean by that is, can you see the world through a lens that is not typically your lens? I'll give you an example. I'm a designer. I tend to see the world through an experience lens of, I'm going to make the coolest building. It's going to be amazing and people are going to love it. And you know what? There's nothing at all wrong with that. But I could also say, what's the budget for that building? Can I really afford to do that? So the other lens might say, that's a cool idea, but my money lens or my performance lens says, maybe not. And what are the interactions of that building or landscape in the broader ecosystem? And how does it impact it positively or negatively? And finally, what are the social equity implications of a particular design solution? And when we co-create, we have a chance to really engage this quadrant, which has been ignored over the last century. I hate to say it, by primarily Eurocentric folks that have been dominating the design world. I'll just say it out loud. By co-creating and bringing in a diverse set of stakeholders, including co-designers, we begin to get into this culture quadrant, and then we begin to get into something more holistic, which is the goal, I think, right? So this is called the integral framework. Many people who know me know I use this, and I force all my students to use it. I find it to be very powerful. It's transformed the way I think about design. I think it's made me a better leader. And I can see the world through multiple lenses, and I like you to be able to do that as well. I could bring the contractor in. This is why we do this, right? We bring the contractor in, and he, she, or they can tell us about their financial perspective in real time in the design process, not 6 months after the drawings are done. Or I could bring the engineer in, right? I'm going to talk more about transdisciplinary in a minute, so I'll stop that. And just say, as a superpower, do you have the capability to think outside of your own lens? Please think about that. If you do, which is really nice, you can begin to think about something that might be holistic. So typically, for example, this is experience. And if you just look through that lens, you're just going to get a piece of the puzzle. This is our performance. And if I just look through there, I'm only going to get this. And this is my systems. If I just look there, I'm only going to get this. And this is my justice lens, right? And if I just look there, I'm only going to get this. I have to be able to look through these all together as a single picture in order to understand something from multiple perspectives, holistically and simultaneously and instantaneously. That, my friends, is, I believe, one of the most ultimate superpowers that you can develop. One of the ways that this plays out in the corporate and governmental world is something called the quadruple or triple or quadruple bottom line. For those of you at Drexel who have gone to the sustainability minor, you know that this is the triple bottom line. We almost call it TBL. People, planet, profit. I like prosperity instead of profit. I think it's a better word. These are different lenses, right? And people make decisions mostly through this lens, by the way. This prosperity profit lens is very destructive, but important. And so here you're seeing three lenses overlapping to create something called sustainability. So your stakeholders tend to be our way of understanding the people that are going to be involved in the process. But and then we also know that if we're smart, short-term investments can lead to long-term economic gains. That's a tough argument. But I think that nature is also a stakeholder, and we haven't talked about what the definition of a stakeholder is. But in this particular case, the natural world, the habitat, the ecology becomes a stakeholder in the design process. Sometimes we bring an ecologist into the design process itself to make sure that that particular lens is understood. And then many of you are designers, you tend to look at through this lens, which has benefits here and could have benefits here and here. Altogether, that makes the quadruple bottom line, meaning 4 lenses again. And these lenses actually map very well to these lenses right here. I just didn't spend the time to really make that clear, so I apologize for that. The message here again is learning how to think across multiple perspectives and learning how to flex that superpower as much as you can. So coming up next, we're going to talk about co-creation with stakeholders. I'm looking forward to chatting with you about that.